Oh, you there? Well, hello guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is DK, and in this video, I'm simply going to show you how you can create a multi-user login system within your Express.js application. We'll be going over in depth. We'll be using MongoDB as our database, and also I'll be showing you some nitty-gritty things you need to know to make sure that your user can actually log in and see the user dashboard, and the admins can actually log in and see the admin dashboard. So let's get started.
Now, first of all, we need to set up our Express project. So what we need to do is right here on my desktop, I can simply create a new folder. On this folder, I'm going to be calling this a multi-user app. I'm going to call that multi-user app. Now, within that app right there, I'm simply going to open up the app in the terminal. And as you can see, if you're using Windows 11, it's going to be easy this way. But then what we simply need to do right here is to initialize our Express.js application. So first of all, we'll do npm init-y. Now, when we do npm init-y, it's simply going to generate a package.json. As you can see it right there, it's going to generate this package.json file, which we can actually use to track all of the dependencies and also to actually run the Express.js server. Now, once we have that, we can simply go on to the next step, which is actually initializing an Express application. Now, you can do this from scratch, but there is a new way you can actually use to create an Express app all the way from scratch. It's called the Express generator. So if you go and search for Express generator, they should tell you some things that you can do. On the first link right there, you see that we can generate an Express application by running npx express generator like this. So we're simply going to copy that, go back there, and we paste that and hit the enter key. Now that should kind of install npx, and that should kind of install the default Express generator that we need. Okay, it's gonna install it. Now, as you can see, it says that the destination is not empty. Do you wish to continue? You can either click yes or no, but this time we don't want to use Jade as our view engine, so we click on no. So while we're generating this Express generator, we'll say -- view equals to EJS. So we say -- view equals to EJS. Now this should generate a new Express application for us using EJS. So we can hit yes and hit enter. Now you can see that right here, there are some files that are going to be generated. You can see there's an app, there's a views, route, bin, and all of the rest that you need in order to make your Express application work. Now the next thing we need to do is say npm install. And now this is going to install all of the dependencies within our package.json file. If I should quickly open up this in VS Code right there, you should see that the package.json file has a little bit of packages to get started. You can see it has cookie parser, it has debug, EJS, Express, HTTP errors, and Morgan. So we simply want to install all those packages. That's why we'd use npm install. Now this is going to download and install all of those packages in this folder right here, or in this app directory. And once it's done, you can see that there'll be a node modules folder right there, which is one thing we need. Now the next thing after this is to install some extra dependencies that we might be needing. Now we'll be using MongoDB, so it's good to install Mongoose. And also, before you do that, make sure you type in npm install mongoose. Now we'll be needing a package called nodemon to automatically restart our server anytime we make a change. And then also we'll be installing .env, which is a package to actually read the env files that we have within our applications. Now I'm simply looking at that. That might not be all that we need, but as we go through this tutorial, we're simply going to install more packages that we actually need for this tutorial. Now, hitting the enter key on the keyboard would actually start installing these packages. So we're going to install Mongoose, nodemon, and .env. Now, since I'm using MongoDB, make sure that you have MongoDB installed on your system. So you can just search for the MongoDB community version. So just search for MongoDB community server and pretty much download the best one for your operating system. So if you do use a Mac, you can have a Mac version or maybe a Windows version, just like I use right here. Now, once you do that, there's one more thing you need to download once you've selected the package you want. So make sure that you go find your community server right there. And then right there, you choose select package, you choose the version. As you can see, the version is like the current version, which is here. And there's like other versions that are supposed to be coming out, but we'll just take the current version, choose our Windows or platform, Mac or Windows or Linux, and then choose the package you want to install. Then hit download right there and everything should be downloaded. Now, once you're done with that, there's one more thing you need to install, but I'm sure it's going to pretty much install with the whole MongoDB community server. So what you need to do is find Mongo or Compass. It's called MongoDB Compass. So it's a simple application where you can visually see the database that you have. So I'm simply going to launch MongoDB Compass right there. And you can see it launches in this kind of mode. It shows you our connection URL, which we need to keep for future use. So I'm simply going to copy that connection URL. So go right there, and I'm going to use Ctrl+C to copy it. And I can hit the connect button right there. And you can see that it launches this database for us, okay? You can see that we have the admin, config, and some database that I've created before. Now take note that I'm not going to be going through all these database stuff again, okay? Take note, I'm not going to be creating all of this. You can see it says it needs a new version for me to install the updates, but we'll just close that for now. So I'm not going to be going through the in-depth of MongoDB. If you want that, I'm going to leave a video down in the description. And if you can't find the video, that means the video is still in production. But I'm going to simply put it down there, so if you're watching in the future, you can actually use that. Now, moving on, what we can simply do right here is to create a new database. So we click on the plus right there, and we'll create a database for ourselves. I'm going to call this database my multi-user. So that's what I'm going to call it, multi-user. And then also I'm going to put that same thing for the collection name. Now the collection name is simply what you want, okay? Just like in MySQL, you do have databases, you have tables, and then you have like each record inside. In MongoDB, you have a database name, and then you should have a collection. A collection is just like the tables inside. So we're simply going to have one for users, and then we can create database. As you can see, we have the users collection, and then also we have the multi-user database, which we have there. Now we have our database set up. Now it's time to set up our own Express.js application. By now you should see that this has finished installing with some errors and everything. We're going to skip that error and then go into launching our application. Now, before we do that, back in the folder right here, you can see that all of the packages that we need for this application has been generated for us. In the views folder, you should see two files, one index and one error.ejs file. And then also, you can see that it has a lot more things to build right there. So what I'm simply going to do right here in this folder is I'm simply going to open up that in VS Code. So I'll say code and dot, and that should launch this folder within VS Code. Now in VS Code, you can see that this is the whole folder. I can simply zoom in a bit for you right here so that you can actually see everything clearly. Now we have our package.json file. Now right here in the package.json file, we simply want to add a new script. We are going to call this script the dev script, which is like a development server. So in the dev script, we're simply going to be using nodemon to actually launch our file. So we say nodemon.bin/www. Now we have all of this, okay? So we have the dev script, and also right in here, we simply want to add in a new file. Call that the .env, which stands for the environmental variable files. So everywhere we have our variables and the environment, it's going to be inside of this file. Now within this file, we simply want to add what we call a port, or we can call it a server_port. And we'll be setting that equal to 3000 for now. Now with this server_port, we're simply going to highlight that server_port. We'll go to the bin folder, which Express generator generated for us, and we go to the www folder. Right in here, we simply want to import something. So we say var, and we simply want to import .env. So we say .env, and we'll be requiring from the .env package that we downloaded. And then also we say .config at the very end. So this is simply going to import that .env and configure it for us. Now take note that even with this, you don't need this first part, so we can take that off and just leave it this way. So we require .env and then we configure it. And now right here where it says port, you can see that it's going to pick from the process.env.port. We can simply change that to the server port, which we've created right here in the env variable. Now we have everything set up. All we need to do is launch our application and see it in the browser. Now to launch the app, it's going to be very, very easy. All we need to do is go into that command prompt terminal right there, or the one from your folder. And then in there, we simply want to launch the application. Now to launch the application is kind of easy. All you need to do is say npm run dev. And if everything is correct, you should see something like this on the screen. As you can see, it says nodemon is not recognized as an internal or external command. Now let's go back to our package.json file and check if nodemon was installed. You can see nodemon was installed. So yes, okay, there needs to be a space right there. So nodemon and .bin/www. Now back in here, we can simply run this again and we should get nodemon started right here. And as you can see, it says port 3000 is already in use, so the port crashed. Now, one thing we can simply do is go back to our env and probably change that to port 3001, since port 3000 is already in use. Now, nodemon should restart, or we can simply stop our application right here in the terminal and then restart the application again. Now, we should have something like this, and pretty much if you don't see any errors, it simply means that your application is live on localhost port 3001. So we can go back to our browser right here and go to a new port. You can visit port 3001 on the browser, and you can see that we have this stuff saying Express. Very, very nice. So we have this Express application launching right there, and also pretty much we can simply find a page that doesn't exist, and we should be getting this 404 not found page, which is actually great. Now, with our Express application launched and ready to go, the next thing we can simply do is to design 4 pages. We'll be designing a login page, an admin page, and also a simple user page. Now for this video, I'm not going to be doing any registration kind of stuff. If you want registration, or if you want to know how to actually make a login system and a register system, I'm going to be leaving the video up on the cards. But right now, we're simply going to be using a login page, we'll be using an admin page, and also like a user page. So let's get started. Now remember, since we're using Tailwind as our major CSS styling language, what we simply want to do is to actually install Tailwind. Now back here in this project, I don't want to cancel anything in our server. So what I'll do is I'll go back to the project folder, right click again and open up in terminal again. Now this should create a separate terminal for us where I can now install Tailwind CSS. Now back here in the browser, all you need to do is go to a new tab and then search for Tailwind. So Tailwind right there. Now when you search for Tailwind, just click on this link where it says installation. So use the installation link right there. Now as you can see, there are many ways you can use CSS or Tailwind CSS. You can use it in Next.js and pretty much a lot of all the JavaScript libraries out there. You can also use a CDN, which is just, I guess, the easiest one to use. But for us, let's just say we go with the CDN. So what we can do with the CDN is that we can say, okay, it says flex, add the play CDN to your stuff. So we simply want to add this CDN, which is right here. So we're going to copy the script tag, and then we'll be adding that to our index.egs file. So right here within our index.egs file, one thing we can simply do is go in right there in the head, and we can delete everything first of all and generate a fresh new boilerplate. Now within this, we simply want to add this CSS style. And now back in the browser, they said try customizing it. So if you want to customize, you can add a new script file underneath it. And then they said try adding some themes and some layers if you want some more layers there. You can say you can use the text.css to add your custom CSS. But for us, we'll not be adding any custom CSS to our stuff. So we're leaving it like that. Now also you can try using a first party plugin if you want a plugin. But for us, I think that's all we need. Back in our Express app, if I should refresh this and let's say we give this text a little bit of colors. So right here in our body tag, we'll be simply adding a h1. Now within this h1, we simply want to add a class, and this class would have like a text of green and 500. And let's just say hello right here. Now if this actually applies to our file right there, we should be having Tailwind CSS working for us. As you can see, it has this hello stuff right there. So which means that this is actually working for us. Now, moving on, we can simply remove that. Now, in order not to waste time with our index page, which should be like the user page, one thing we can simply do also is to take up some Tailwind components. So right here on the components page of the Tailwind CSS page, we can simply browse for some components. Now, while we're browsing for some components, we simply want something simple to just show the user. So we'll simply go down a little bit to look for one of the things that we can use for our user page. So I guess this one just shows one user stuff. I think that's too boring. Now there are like different ones that are locked. All those ones that are locked, you need to pay a price for. But the ones that are not locked, you can actually use them for free. So back in, let's scroll up a little bit. We'll try to find some of them that are not actually locked. Now we'll be having these banners right here, which we can use. We have some headers, some flyout menus. I'll just say for us, let's just use something basic, something simple that we can all use at the same time. So let's just use pretty much this banner layout right here. So on the banner layout, when you click on that, you can see that it has some banners that we can actually use. So it takes some time for it to load up. These are the banners we have. I think that's not all. So let's simply go down and try to see some of this multi-column layout. So as you can see, these ones are the premium ones, so we can only have a preview of them. There's no way we can actually use them within our project. But pretty much there are other tools that we can actually use, guys. So for us, let's just take this simple dashboard right there. So as you can see, these are different dashboards that we can use. So I think I like the color of this one, of this one right here at the top. So you have a simple dashboard right here. We can simply say that we want the HTML and then we can view the code. Right, these are all the codes that you need to create that dashboard. So one thing we can do is actually copy the code right there, go back to VS Code, and we just paste the code directly inside. And when we paste the code directly inside, it's going to bring in a lot of stuff, as you can see, a whole lot of stuff. And now if you did the exact same thing with the thing, as the component, your Express document should now look like that dashboard, as you can see. So you can see that we have a sign out button, this button, calendars, pages, and everything. Now what I'm simply going to do is where it says dashboard, that exact place where it says dashboard, I'm simply going to change dashboard from dashboard to user dashboard only. So it's going to be somewhere around here. So we have two menus and this place here called dashboard. I'm simply going to change that to user dashboard. Now we'll change that to user dashboard, and back here when we refresh, you should see user dashboard right there. I will simply create a new page also. So we create a new page for this guy. So we can simply like copy paste the project. So copy and we'll paste it in the view again. This time we'll simply name this to admin.ejs file. Now within here, we simply want to go down on that same spot and change this to an admin dashboard. So now you have an index, which is a user dashboard, and an admin dashboard. Now finally, one thing we'll do is that we'll create a login form to actually log in our users, and it's going to show any one of those two dashboards depending on what we have, guys. So it's going to show depending on what we have. Now the next thing we need to do is to create that login file. So we say login.ejs right there. When we create the login.ejs, we can simply generate our boilerplate. And remember, from the index.ejs, we simply need this script tag in order to add TailwindCSS. So right in here, we simply add that to our file. Now back in here, we simply want to look for some login page. So we simply go back a bit and let's look for some forms. As you can see, these are some forms. This is a sign-in and registration form. So we can use that. So this is a typical sign-in form, which we can actually use. There's also a dark mode, but for us, we'll be using this first one right here. So we go to the code and we copy all the code. And right in here with our body, we'll paste that code. Now this should be our login page. And for this, we don't need this, not a member 14 days free trial. We just want a simple login page that we can use. Now the next thing we need to do in order to preview all of this is to actually create what we call routes, okay? Now the routes that we can only see is this index.ejs route. Now pretty much if I try to visit the login page by saying maybe like /login, it's not going to show me anything. As you can see, it says it cannot be found, but we can actually route that so that it shows us the login page anytime we go to the login route. Now in order to get the route, we need to go to routes right here. And within this index.ejs file, we can create a new get route. So we can say router.get, and we want to get the login page. Now it's going to generate this function for us, which takes a request, a response, and a next option. So we don't need the next, we can only use request and the response. Now the next thing we need to do is to actually render the login page anytime we actually visit the login route. So we say rest.render, and we want to render the login page this way. So when we render the login page, now if we go back to the browser and try to visit /login, that should simply show us this sweet looking login page for us. And that is okay. Now the next thing we need to do is also the admin page. So right in here, we simply can duplicate this. When we duplicate this, we can simply go down a bit, go say whenever we visit the admin page, just render the admin EJS file. Now simply if I go to the admin, boom, you see there's an admin page. Now if I go over to, let's say the login page, you should see the login just like usual. And if I just go to the home page, there should be the user dashboard. So pretty much we have every one of this. Now the next thing we need to do is to start setting up what we call sessions, because from the sessions, that's how we check if we are actually logged in or not. Okay, so from the sessions, that's how we check if you're logged in or not. Now we are simply going to do something simple. Now right here in Express, we simply want to go to the app.js file, and by default you don't get the sessions set for you. So there's one thing we need to install right here. So back in our Express window where we started our Express application, we can simply stop that. Now there are two packages that we need to install. So we say npm install. We need to install Express-sessions. And then also we simply want to install a different package called MongoDB Express Session. So we simply search for MongoDB Express Session. So when we search for MongoDB Express Session, it's going to bring up a package like this. Now this one says connect MongoDB session, which we can actually use. As you can see, there's a basic usage of how we want it to be right here. Okay, so there's a very, very basic usage of how we want it to be. Now we can simply copy that code also. But first of all, let's install Express Session. Make sure that's Express Session. So I'll simply search for Express Session. Now we simply say the first one, yeah, actually Express Session. So back in here, we can simply hit the enter key, and that is going to install Express Session for us, which we can actually use. And then also right here in this connect MongoDB session, we can actually use that also. So we can copy this Mongo Express session, go back to this place and paste it right there to install it. Now Express is going to install the Express session for MongoDB and also the actual package called Express Session. Now once that is installed, we can get on to creating our sessions and actually using the sessions in our application. So as you can see, it's installing. Now the major reason why we're doing this is that we want to be able to save our sessions right in our database. Okay, we want to save the sessions right in the database, not in the browser. So the browser can still identify that this user is logged in, but then it's coming from the server, not from our actual cookie right there. So if you happen to go clear the cookie, it's still going to have the session stored for you and waiting for you. Now, the next thing we need to do is to actually copy this two line where it says import session and Mongo database stored. So we simply want to copy those two. Right here, you can see that this is finished or has finished installing. So we can copy this to go back to VS Code and we paste that to right here. So we are actually importing the session and also the MongoDB session store. Okay, that's what we need right there. Now back in the browser, we can simply go and get this actual MongoDB connection string. So right here we go just after where it says after Express. So we go right there, just underneath that, and we paste that there. Now this is going to take up what we call the store and take a URL, which will be a link to our database. Now what we can simply do right here is to actually use a variable from our .env file. So the thing we can do is to actually import .env. So we say require, and we want to simply require .env, and then when we require .env, we want to simply launch the config of .env. Now, moving on, we can simply say that the URL is going to come from the process .env.mongodb. I think it's just okay like that. .uri.mongodb, and this is going to be the name of the collection that it should create while creating our database. Now finally, we simply want to go back to this place and say that we want to store this. So if there's an error actually connecting to the database, it's going to pop out this error. Otherwise, it's going to make use of that connection. Now back in the browser, we can simply copy the final step right here. Boom. So we can tell it to use this session. So back in here, we can go down where it says app.use, and then we can paste it right there. Now we want to be able to use the session within all of our routes. So we don't need it on the encoded JSON and everything. So we can simply take this down a little bit. So we can simply take it down here to where it says this, just right before this index router. So we know that this session is going to take 1 week at least. It's going to take 1 week. But if we don't want it to take 1 week, we can simply remove this, and that is just going to take 1 day. So after 1 day, the user is going to be signed out. Now we need a secret for this, and the secret can be anything. It's just used to hash the session. So you can use pretty much anything there. It doesn't really matter. And also you can see that it's optional if you don't want it. Now, these are some boilerplates that you can use, but we can simply remove this. And now we have all the sessions set up and ready for us to use. Now, the next thing we need to do is to actually make sure that our MongoDB connection is actually properly connected. Now, back in the env file, we'll go in there and we'll go to the second line, paste that, and we need a connection string. Now, according to MongoDB, your connection string should also be right here in your database. So if you go back here and probably let's disconnect from the database. So we can go to connection info and you can see that it has 5 database and all of the rest. But then what we need to do is actually disconnect from the database. So we say disconnect. Now remember this connection string we copied the other time? That is what we actually need. So we can copy that connection string right there. Back in here, we'll paste that connection string. And then finally, we follow it with a slash. And we can add the name of the database that we are using. Now for us, it's going to simply be our new database called multi-user. So right here, we can say multi-user. And that is our database right there. Now finally, we can simply start up our application and see if it's going to work smoothly. Okay, back in this Express window, we can simply clear out everything and then run our Express.js application again. So we can say npm run dev. Now when we hit npm run dev, that should try making a connection to our database. And if everything works well, when we visit our document and refresh, and we see no errors, that simply means that it's actually working. So as you can see, this side, it's still loading right here for some reason. But if that loads and doesn't give any error, it means that we are good to go. So we have that working, I guess. We can simply check our multi-users right there. We simply refresh the database by clicking right here. And that should refresh all of our database. Right now, it's not creating any session yet, probably because we haven't actually saved anything to the session. But let's simply visit our application. So I'll cut it from this page and I'll go to a different tab entirely and paste it right there. Now that should load up our user dashboard if everything is to work well. Now, as you can see, it says that error connecting to database, and these are the things that happened. Now, pretty much if you're using one of the recent versions of Express, MongoDB, they actually changed a little bit of stuff about their database connection. So back here in VS Code, we can simply go to the env file, and instead of using localhost right there, it's going to be 0.0.0.0. Now, I don't know why they actually changed it to something like this, but this is what you simply need to use if you're actually trying to connect to a MongoDB database. So once we have that, we can simply go back into the app and then run our application again by calling npm run dev. Now we can simply go back to the app and probably refresh, and you can see that this time around it loads the document properly, and also there is no error in our database right there or our console right there. So pretty much if you have this, you can go back to the database and hopefully refresh. You should get a new collection right here, and this collection is going to save anything that has to do with the session of your application. So we have the session up and running, and we have our database connection working. The next thing we need to do actually is to create a connection to the database so that we can actually start logging in or actually sending requests to the database. Now, in order to do this, all we need to do is to create a new folder pretty much outside of this. So we create a new folder and we call this our database folder. Within this database folder, we simply want to create a file called maybe MongoDB.js. And now inside of this MongoDB.js, we simply want to create a connection to our Mongo database. Okay, we want to create a connection to our MongoDB database. Now we'll be using Mongoose for this. So what you simply need to do is to say const, you can use const and say Mongoose equals to require Mongoose. So we simply want to require Mongoose from the Mongoose library. Now I'm simply not going to bore you with all of the information. I simply have it right here where I've done it before and actually tested it to see that it's working perfectly. So I'm simply going to import that MongoDB connection string into our application right there. So right here we have all the things that we need. Now I'm simply going to explain each one of them. Mongoose is actually getting the Mongoose library which we installed with our application. And with this line right here, we're simply actually connecting to the MongoDB database. Okay, we're connecting to the MongoDB database. Now remember that our connection string is already here, MongoDB. So what we can do is to actually require .env. So we require .env right here. And when we require .env, we simply want to make sure that we also config it. So we turn on the configurations of that stuff. Now, the next thing we need to do is to actually replace this whole string with our Mongo database URL. So we say process. So process.env. This is the connection string that we'll be using. And if it's connected and working properly, it should do something like this for us, okay? It should show us all of this. If it's connected, it's going to show this. If it's not, it's going to show this. Now, also we can export default, or sorry, we simply want to do modules.export. Modules.export, and we simply want to export this Mongoose connection. So we export Mongoose. Now we have this exported. So this will be our connection. The next thing we need to do is to actually create what we call a schema. A schema is simply just like a table where you want to save all the documents. Now, if you note, we already created one schema here called users. You can manually create this, or you can create this within the application also. That works either way. So with that, we can simply go into the database file, create a new folder, and create a new file. And then we simply want to call this our user schema. Now we say user schema.js. Now right here, we simply want to require this Mongoose connection that we had right here. Okay, so this Mongoose connection, or we can call it Mongoose connect right there. So it's easier to use. So we can require Mongoose connect. Right here, all we need to do is call in Mongoose connect. Now, pretty much if it's not coming in, all you need to do is actually manually require it. So we can say const Mongoose connect. It's going to be required from the remaining file. So it's going to be required from /MongoDB, which is the file where we actually have our connection. Now, the next thing we need to do is to use that Mongo database connection and create what we call a new schema. Okay, right here you can see that we exported Mongoose Connect, and Mongoose Connect is pretty much not part of our whole package. Okay, it's not part of our whole package, so pretty much this is not going to work anything. That is one thing you need to know. Now, pretty much if you want this to do something, all you need to do is say Mongoose Connect is equal to, so const Mongoose Connect is equals to mongoose.connect this database. Now this should export the right thing. Now right here we can simply use Mongoose Connect dot schema. Now we simply want to create a schema. Now I won't also bore you with all the schema information because I have them already saved up somewhere. So I can simply head over back to where I have the MongoDB connection schema, and we can use that schema to work with things. So right here we have this. Now you have this Mongoose, which you actually need to require at the top of your file, and then you have your user schema, which you can actually use also. So with this, you can also call this Mongo Connect instead of the schema. So you can say Mongo schema.model and this the schema. So you don't need to require Mongoose since we are actually connecting from the Mongoose library right here. Now, once we have this, we can simply check if everything is actually working well. Also, take note that you need to export this. So we say export or modules.export, and we simply want to export majorly not one thing here. We simply want to export the user schema right there. So we are exporting the user schema, and we can call in this user schema from anywhere in our document and see if it actually works. Okay, so we have the schema. Now within our schema, we have the name and the email, and obviously we want to have a password also. So we have a password, which should be a type of string also. So everything right there, all settled and laid out. Now, back here in the app.js file, what I can simply do right here is to require that schema and use that schema to actually try to create a new user. So right here in our routes, in the index.ejs file, we can simply say whenever we go to the home route, it should just create a new schema for us. Now, what we can do is to actually import that user schema. So we say user, and that should import the user schema from our user schema database. Now, what we can do is to create a new user. And also, I said I already have that copied down right here, so we don't waste much time. Now, we can simply create a new user by using that MongoDB connection schema. It's going to look like this, where you have a new user, you have a name, and also we have a password, probably like 1234. So we say password, and the password is going to be pass123, and we have the new user.save. Now the new user is going to be modeling this user right here. So it's going to save that. And if it's properly saved, you see that it says user saved successfully. So right here within our application, it says that Mongo's connect.schema is not a constructor. Mongo's connect.schema is not a constructor. So let's see what's wrong right here. So we're simply using Mongo's connect, which will be what this returns. And also in our schema, it says it's not the right thing we should be using. See, so let's simply use the Mongoose library. So we call in Mongoose and also call in Mongoose right here. And that should also import Mongoose from Mongoose. So we have that connection schema right there. And let's check our console again. It's not giving us any errors. And also you can see that it says connected to MongoDB, which is actually great. This is the line we are actually reading from right here. It says it's connected to MongoDB. Now we can go back to the browser and go to the home page and probably refresh the page. If it refreshes smoothly without any errors in the console, you should have your new user saved successfully. Now back in here, we can go check our users and you can see that there's a new user. There's this guy called John Doe. This is the email and this is the password. So we know that the new users is actually working right now. So that is the good thing about it. We know that our new user is working within our index.ejs file. So we can simply clear out the new users. Now we can get onto the actual part where we need to hold the session and check if a user is logged in before we can actually show that he's logged in. Okay, because right now, if I go right here, you can see that in the user dashboard, it shows, in the admin dashboard, it shows, and pretty much in the login dashboard also, or the login page also shows up. Now what we need to do is also kind of like adding one special property to show that this person is an admin or a user. So in the user schema, we simply want to add one more thing called the role. So the role is going to be passed out as something that we normally use to check if he's an admin or actually a user, okay? If he's an admin or a user. Now, pretty much, the first thing we need to do is to check for the sessions to see if there's actually anyone logged in before we can actually push anything to the user. So in the index.ejs, what I simply want to do is to run what we call a middleware. This middleware will check if there's a user that's logged in and then use that middleware. So it works like this. So one thing I can do is that I can go down here and define a middleware, okay? Or I can define it right here at the top. So this middleware will be called a function. This function would take a lot of things. So it's going to take the request variable, it's going to take the response and the next variable. Now we simply want to say, okay, within this function, we want to say const user will be equal to rec.session.user. And now this is either going to return an array or pretty much a null or undefined value. So once we have that, we want to simply call this the check user function. And now it's going to return an array or something else. So we can say if there is no user. So if not user, that means this user isn't actually signed in. What we simply want to do is to redirect him to the login page. So we say rest.redirect. So rest.redirect, and we simply want to redirect this user to the login page. So if this user is not signed in. So else, if the user is signed in, we simply want to move on to the next function. Okay, so we want to move on to whatever it's going to be next. Now we can simply take this name of this middleware and we pass it in right here. So on the index page, we want to simply pass in and check the middleware first. And then also we want to check that same middleware right here in the admin page. So you got this middleware, but you don't need the middleware on the login page. Okay, you don't need the middleware on the login page. Now pretty much right here, if I should go to this index page, you should see that it redirects me to the login page. And if I should try to visit the admin page, it still brings me back to the login page since it can't find any user in our session. Okay, So now within the login page, we simply want to actually log in our users. So back here in the login page for our views, login right here, we can simply go work with the form. So with the form, once they type in their values, what we can simply do right here is that we can say it's required, which they already set for us. And also the password is required, which is actually okay. You can get the name, which is name of password, and the name here is email, which is actually nice. So the action we'll be sending this to the login/new route. So we'll be sending a post method with all the users data to the login/new route. And then it's using the post method also. So back in the index.js file, what we can simply do is to say a router.post. So anytime there's a post to the login/new route, so login/new, we want to simply run that function. For this, we don't need to check the middleware, but we need this function for the request and the response. So pretty much once they put in their email and the password and they send it, we simply want to get that email and password. So we say get the email and the password, and we'll be getting this from the rec.body. So we're getting it from the request body. Now, if this works well, we simply want to just console log for now. So we console.log the email, just the email for now. And then we can send rest.send. We'll be sending just our rest.status. So we'll be sending a status code of 200. And then also we can just simply like send some JSON along with it. And it's going to send this JSON along with our response. So we simply need this here instead. So now we have everything properly sorted. Now let's try to see if we can actually log in our user. Back in the browser, we can go right here and put in an email address and pretty much put in any password that we like and hit the sign in. And it says that it cannot find where we are actually trying to send the data to. Okay, it can't find where we're trying to send that data to. Now we can go right here and see what the error is. It says it cannot post to /login. So what we need to do is make sure it's posting to /login/new. So back here on the login EJS, this is /login. Okay, so we can go back a bit, probably refresh once more and then try it again. So right here we'll try with the different password, hit sign in. Now you can see that it shows us this stuff right here. And this simply means that our request actually went through and we were able to get the data from the body right there. So now, simply since that works, the next thing we need to do is to actually find this user from our database and see if this user is actually there. Okay, if the user is actually what he says he is. So what we can do right here is that we can call in the try catch method since we're working with some connections. So we can use the try catch method. So we try some stuff and catching if there's an error, and then we can run some functions if this happens to be an error in our work. We can simply console log the error. So console log or console error, and we want to console the error. Now within our try catch block, we simply want to first of all check if the user is there. If the user is there. Now when we check if the user is there, then we can compare if the password actually matches. In order to check if the user is there, one thing we can actually do is to run a user framework. Okay. In order to check if the user is there, we can simply make a call to the database to select and find those stuff. And how do you make the call? Remember the user, we can simply use that. We can say const user would be equal to await, and we want to await user. So remember the user model or the user schema that we actually created right here. So we simply want to await that user dot find. So we want to await the user dot find something, but it's giving us an error right here because we're trying to use an await without an async function. All we need to do is go right here and say async, and then that should work smoothly. So we can say user dot find one. So we can find one where the email is this email, and then close that off. Now this should return everything back to the user. And then we can also like just return the user as a JSON. So we can say return the user. Now let's try that one more time. So back here on the login page, we're simply going to refresh a bit and then put in some details right there and then sign in. Now it says that it returns null because it can't actually find that user. Remember, the user in our database is this guy John Doe with this example right there. So that means it didn't return anything. But this time, let's try to log in with the actual email. So we'll paste him right there, and then we put in some password, and then hit sign in. Now you can see that it returned all of these values right there. It returned the ID, it returned the name, returned the email, returns the passwords, and so on. Okay, so that's what it returned actually. Now pretty much, since we know what it returned, we can simply do something else. So instead of actually calling the user and assigning everything, we simply want to take in the data that is there. Okay, so simply we want to go find some of the data there and pick out some variables out of it. So instead of that, we'll be taking out the email and also the password. So we'll be taking out the email and the password from this stuff right here. That is what we need to do with this stuff. So whenever it returns that data, we're simply going to pick out the email and pick out the password, as you can see right there. Okay, now pretty much you can see that it's giving us some form of error because it's trying to pick out this email right here instead of actually using the email address up there. So we can still use the same user variable. So we can say this is going to be the user, and then we can extract the user out of it. So we can say const, and we extract the email and the password out of the user, which should still work well. Nope, that's still not working well. We can use that this way. So we have the user email and the user password. And according to this, you can see it gives us an array of values which we can use. So in the user right there, we simply want to take that user. So we say if there is a user, that means there's somebody with that name, then we simply want to do something. So if there is a user in our database with that email the person is sending forward, then what we simply want to do is to check the password and also compare the row. Okay, that's what we simply want to do. If there is a user, we simply want to check the password and then compare the row. So if there's a user, we simply want to find if the password matches. So we can use a ternary operator for this. So we can say check passwords. Now we can check the password. Now the password we need to check is the user password and this. So we say we check password equals to user the password. If it's equal to the password, then we want to simply set in true, otherwise we're setting in false. Which simply means that if the user password from the database simply matches the password that this user is sending, we simply want to set in a true, otherwise it's a false. And now we can say if not check password, that means the password doesn't match in any way, we can simply return to the user. So we can say res.send that the password doesn't match. So we can send a simple message saying, sorry, incorrect. We can say please, or we can say sorry, email or password is incorrect, like that. So we can say email or password is incorrect. You simply don't want to tell them if it's the email or if it's the password. Now also, pretty much if the user wasn't found, so if there was actually no user with that email, what we simply want to do right here is that we simply want to check or tell the user that, sorry, we can't find any account for this. So we can say, sorry, this account does not exist. This user does not exist in this way. So pretty much since we have this user does not exist and we have sorry, email or password is incorrect, then we can simply check in the row. So pretty much if the password is not correct, that means it's false. So the next thing we want to do is send this. Otherwise, we simply want to send something else. So else, since the password is correct, we simply want to check the row. We want to check the row. So now pretty much we can still use a ternary operator to show the location it should redirect to. So we can say const location will be equal to, now if the row, which is what we get, so we say user dot row is equal to admin, then we want to simply go to the admin route. Otherwise, we want to go to the home page right there. So we're using this ternary operator to check if the role is an admin, then we want to move to the admin route. Otherwise, we simply want to move to the home route. Now, pretty much what we can now do is this. We can now go and say res.redirect back to the location which it should be on. And now, pretty much if there is nothing there, because there should be a row, But if there is no row, that means it's going to go back to the home route. That means even though the user is not an admin or is not a user, it's always going to redirect back to the user route, which is the index page. Now, this should work in a way. So let's see. Back here in our database, we can see that this is our email and our password is pass123. So back in the browser, we can go back, refresh a bit, and now let's try the login. We'll log in with the email and we log in with the password. Or let's just put in some password that doesn't match and see what it says. It says, sorry, email or password is incorrect. Very nice. Now, that is what we actually wanted to do. Now, the next thing we need to do is to see if the password is correct. So I'm going to put in the correct password and then sign in. Now, you can see that it still brings me back to this homepage here, even though it actually went through, because from our server right here, you can see that it went to post on the login page, which is where we process everything. It went back to the home page and then came back to the login page. And this is simply because we didn't set any session while we're creating this. So pretty much, in order to complete everything, we simply want to set up the session. So we can say rec.session.user will be equal to the user right there at the top. And that's all we need. Now back here in the browser, we can refresh, go right in there, we can log in with that email and the right password. So PASS123 and then sign in. So as you can see, it simply goes to the user dashboard, which means our login is actually working. Now the next thing we need to do is to actually make sure that it's only going to be for the users. That means only the users get to see this. Otherwise, it's simply going to the admin place, okay? So now we simply want to go to the admin right here. And as you see, if we go to the admin, it still shows the admin dashboard, which is not actually okay. Now, the funny thing is this. Before we can actually start checking for the row, remember the first user we added to our database had no row. So we need to add a new row for our database. So the next thing we need to do is pretty much we can add data. So we can say we want to insert to the document directly. And now we can insert a new document if we want, or we can update one of the previous documents we have there. So the thing we can do is right here, we can cancel this and we simply want to edit the document. And while editing the document, we simply want to add a new field. Now this new field will be called row. So we go in there and we call it row. And then also it should have a role of user in this case. So right here, the value of this should be user. And then we can update that. And once we update that, it's simply going to show right underneath there. And simply we want to create a different user entirely. So we can simply copy this document or pretty much clone the document. Then for this, we want to simply add a user called admin. The email for this user is going to be admin@example.com. And then we can hit insert. Now that should insert 2 new users with the same name. I think we should call this John Mark since he's an admin. And the other one is John Doe. And now we can update both users. As you can see, we have the role for both of them. There's an admin and there's a user. So back in here, what we simply want to do is to re-log in so that we can save the new data to the session. So what we can simply do is on the browser, we can go back to the login page and log in as a user. So when we log in as a user, which should be john@example.com and PASS123, now that should log into this dashboard as the user, saving our user role information also. Now back in here, what we simply want to do is to check if the role is equal to a user, then we can stay on the index page. Otherwise, we can go to the home page or this admin page. So what we can do is say, let's get the row. So we say const row from the rec.session.user. Now we can get the row and we can say if the row is equal to admin, then what we simply want to do is further on redirect to the admin page. So we say rest.redirect to admin page like that. That is if the row happens to be an admin row. Otherwise, it can just go down and render this index page. Now, this same thing is what we're simply going to add to this one right here called the admin page right here. But in this case, it's going to have a twist. So if the row is equal to a user, we simply want to go back to this home page. And with that, guys, we're being able to actually show the pages that are related to the users only. So if I go back here and probably refresh this, and I try to go to the admin page, you should see that it brings me back to the user's dashboard immediately. And if I try to do it again by going and typing admin right there and hitting enter, you see that it still brings me back to the user dashboard page, which is actually great. Now also, let's just use the sign out button to actually make things work. So I'll just click there and it should properly sign out if that's working. Or we can simply go back to the login page and try to log in with a different user. Now remember from our database that John Mark is the admin and John Doe is the user. We can simply log in with this admin email right there. So all we simply want to do is to use admin@example.com, and then we can use the password, which is pass123, and sign in. Now you should see that this brings me to the admin dashboard immediately. So all the admin things get to be in the admin area and all the user things gets to be in the user area. If I should go right here and try to visit the user dashboard, you see it still brings me back to the admin dashboard. And if I should remove this and just go back, you see it still brings me to the admin dashboard, which simply means that our multi-user application is fully complete, guys. If you like this video, hit the thumbs up down below, hit subscribe button also so that you don't miss out videos like this. And pretty much thank you for staying to this time. This video had been a whole lot for me to make, for me to record. So I would like it if you subscribe to the channel. And also for those who are simply learning Express.js and you want to get good at Express.js, I'm simply going to leave a video in the card right now so that you can actually check out the benefits of Express.js. See you next time.